My mouth still hurts quite a bit. Hey guys, what's up? And today I'm gonna start a new TV review series where I review the 2004 Fox classic Lost. It's on Fox, right? Yeah. Anyway, I wrote the script for this review like 1.5 years ago, so I may miss a couple of things. I may mistake a couple of things, and don't blame me now. Blame the old me. Well, anyway, this show, Lost, is written and produced by J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof. So, you know the story. A plane crashed on an island and about 48 men got out of the plane and survived, but knowing that they're stuck on the island. Simple setting, but it'll go extremely complicated real soon. So, here are some characters that you need to know. Jack, the main character, who's brave and very scientific. Kate, kind of Jack's sidekick, but she's also a strong, independent woman. And we also have Charlie, who is a very sentimental and impulsive person. And also a bit of trivia, he's the bassist of a band named Drive Shaft, but I don't think that's important right now. And we also have other characters like John Locke, who is pretty much the opposite of Jack, who is not scientific and who is a little superstitious and who believes in, I guess, myths and legends. And we also have characters like Saeed, who's very resourceful. We have Claire, who is who was pregnant, and we have Hurley, who's obese. So there you go, a set of very diverse characters, you must say, and also Harold, I believe. But yeah, anyway, there are so many characters. It'll take an hour for me to list out all of them. But yeah, there you go. There are the characters. And now I'm going to talk about the set. When you are stuck on an island in the middle of nowhere, you really don't expect anything to happen. And that's why this show is so intriguing, and it just makes me so curious, because I don't expect anything to happen. That's why anything can happen. It's so ambiguous, it's so questionable. It's so ominous, it's amazing. So many questions, so many strange things, and that's pretty much the premise of Lost. So we have the pilot episode, which is split into two parts, pilot part 1 and 2, and because it's sort of 1.5 hours long, and each part holds 45 minutes long or so. And the first part basically introduces the set, the characters, and the people. And the pilot episode is actually one of my favorite pilot episodes of all time, if not my favorite. It's even better than the Mr. Robot and Breaking Bad pilot episode, in my opinion. And yeah, it's a really exciting and intriguing pilot episode with a lot of action going on, but at the same time, it doesn't overshadow the character developments. And yeah, John Locke, the way John Locke is introduced into the show is really amazing. You know, I believe his first shot was the orange in his mouth thing. That shot's kind of iconic, because you can really see his optimism, strangely, after crashing the plane and being stranded on an island. And we also have Sawyer, who is a little bit of a rebel, who's always against the big team, you know, who's always fighting back. And on the second part of the pilot episode, things get a little crazier and stranger. Like, first of all, we get these weird noises and sounds, you know, like you're stranded on an island in the middle of nowhere. Anything can happen. And then suddenly you hear these sounds in the forests, and the trees started to shake. It's actually kind of scary. And then they actually ventured into the forests and they found a polar bear. What? And then the reason why they went into the forest is to get signal, because apparently they have a little radio device found on the plane. So they went to a mountaintop on the island, and they decided to turn on the radio and try to get some signal so that they could receive help. And then all of a sudden, there was this woman in the radio speaking French, and somebody translated it, and apparently the woman said that everyone killed her friends and she was alone on the island, and this recording had been repeating itself for 16 years. And yeah, jeez. And to make it even creepier and eerier, Charlie said, "Guys, where are we?" And boom, the episode ends. And oh my gosh, I mean, of course I'm scared, but I'm extremely intrigued at the same time. And that's what I really, really, really love about this TV show. And then we continue on to episode 3, Tabula Rasa. In comparison with the pilot episode, this episode doesn't really do much. You know, nothing that important happened. John Locke helped Walt to find a dog. Vincent, Walt, by the way, is the son of Harold. Yeah, so many characters. I don't have time to explain it. And Jack, the main character, realized that Kate was a criminal, and Hurley was afraid of Kate because of that. And Hurley also knew about that, so it makes for some awkward comedy, I guess. And yeah, speaking of awkward comedy, I think this episode is actually quite funny in terms of awkward comedy. But again, the central theme of the episode isn't really built on that. And we are also introduced to these two Korean characters who doesn't speak English at all. And it's good to see such a diverse cast, and it's also good to see such such a change in perspective. And then let's talk about episode 4, Walkabout. Oh my gosh. I wrote the entire part of this script with rhymes. Okay, let's talk about episode 4, Walkabout. So episode 4 was more about John Locke and his walkabout. Yeah, damn. Anyway, John Locke decided to hunt for boars, while the other survivors clean up gores and burn them while John Locke's returning. And I actually really enjoyed this episode because it's the first time we get to actually dive deep into this interesting character of John Locke. In the beginning of pilot episode, we see John Locke standing up fine and walking around. But when you take a closer look at the flashbacks, you'll realize that he is actually a crippled man. And crashing the plane healed his cripple. And yes, that's one of the biggest questions in the entire show. By the way, if you haven't watched Lost Season 1, I highly recommend you not to watch this review, because I'm going to have to talk about spoilers almost every single episode. And, yeah. But yeah, for some reason, the island has healing powers, so that's pretty strange and creepy at the same time. Yeah, this episode is quite magical and thrilling, and we also see a few characters with the tension building between them. Moving on to episode 5, White Rabbit. I don't know why, but I forgot to mention that I really appreciate and enjoy how the show brings a flashback of a character in every single episode. Like, yeah, every single episode has their own respective character to talk about and to dive deep about and to learn, and for us to learn about. And on episode 5, White Rabbit, we get some more information about Jack's past and his father. So yes, Jack started to see this weird man in the suit, and he is actually later revealed to be his father. And then John Locke kept saying that the island is magical and something's wrong with the island, but of course, Jack didn't believe it, and so did most others. And yes, there are more and more questions unanswered. And on this episode, Jack also wandered around the island searching for water, and he stumbled upon some really weird and strange and unexplainable things. Like, the island is a cross between a mind game, a weird ancient historical site, and some weird criminal base. It's really weird. But yeah, on this episode, we also learn about how precious fresh water actually is. And then we have episode 6, House of the Rising Sun, which is an awesome episode title, first of all. But then again, similar to Tabula Rasa, there aren't any crazily important scenes on this episode. In the present day, we see the main characters getting chased by bees, and yeah, bees. And we also have scenes concerning John Locke and Charlie's guitar. Like, Charlie had been playing his guitar a lot, and John Locke took it and hit it, and Charlie really wanted to get it back, but John Locke had to teach Charlie a lesson. And instead of me being annoyed at John Locke, I think he is an even more interesting of a character. But still, not much is happening. There are still weird magical things happening. There are still weird hallucinations, and not many questions had been answered yet. And I actually kind of don't like the ending of the episode. It just ended with Hurley playing music in his music player. Again, just like how episode 3 had ended. But then we get a bit of an improvement on episode 7, The Moth. On this episode, we get to learn more about Charlie, played by Dominic Monaghan. You may know him from Lord of the Rings. I actually do like Charlie's character a lot, especially on this episode where we see him struggle with drug abuse and the symptoms after getting rid of drugs in the present day, and also his troubles in the past. And yeah, Charlie is one of my favorite characters. And we also see Kate and Saeed building more antennas to receive more signals. And overall, again, nothing that crazy happened, but the way the episode ended, I was really, really touched. What Charlie did was actually, I guess it was a good thing. You know, I wouldn't say the ending of the episode is unpredictable. I guess it's sort of a cliche move to throw things into the fire, like a little mini twist. But still, what Charlie did is quite admirable. But another thing to add is that burning drugs probably isn't a smart move. But yeah, on to episode 8, Confidence Man. And after focusing on characters like John Locke, Jack, Charlie, and the Quans in the previous episodes, and learning why are they here, this episode is about Sawyer, also one of my favorite characters in the entire show. Also, in the present day, Shannon had asthma, but somebody stole her medicine apparently, and somebody knocked Saeed down, and all of the clues lead to Sawyer doing all of those things. So now Sawyer is kind of the ultimate bad guy in this episode, but he's also at the same time sort of an anti-hero. And yeah, this episode also contains a torture scene between Saeed and Sawyer, and it's pretty violent, I have to say. But because of that, I like how gritty and realistic Lost is. And yeah, according to the teaser before the title sequence, and I'm sure everyone could predict that this episode is about Saeed, and it's episode 9, Solitary. So Saeed's backstory was he was working as a soldier who gets the bad guys to speak. So he used to torture people. And then he had to torture someone that he loved, Nadia. And I think that's one of the more interesting and hard-hitting and heavy, emotionally heavy backstories of the characters. Also, in present day, which is a bit weird and not too dramatic, Hurley decided to build a golf course. And amazingly, Jack and everyone also played golf. And everyone's playing along with Hurley, so that's cool. And yeah, I figured I should probably give my first spoiler alert because something crazy happened. Finally. Yep. So let's go back to Saeed. So on episode 1, he had found out about the mysterious French woman in the radio. So he really, really wanted to track down where the radio was from. So yeah, he found a wire on the island, and it led him to the French woman. So finally, one of the biggest questions in the series Lost is finally being explained. The French woman's name was Danielle, and she was talking about how trees were whispering and there were some kind of sickness, and her family, Alex and Robert, were somehow killed because of the sickness, and then she started talking about the black and the white rock, and it's all more questions. One question answered, more questions popped up. And I love it. I love how interesting and weird and odd everything is. And yeah, the white and black rock, similar to the white and black chess game that John Locke played with Walter. And yeah, also the black and white stones Jack found in the bodies in the cave. Yeah, that is some good foreshadowing and referencing. But yeah, at first Saeed was sort of captured by Danielle, but later they kind of they kind of became friends. But at the end, they had a little conflict and they split ways again. So it's really interesting. I was really curious to see how this storyline develops. And then moving on to episode 10, Raised by Another. At first, I thought this episode was about Mike Dawson, but no, it's actually about Claire. So this time, things started to get even weirder. Claire was dreamwalking in a nightmare, and it was a very horrifying start for an episode. And Claire had her baby coming out, and she saw someone trying to attack her baby in the dream, but she didn't see who was that. And now we have a mystery thriller episode. It's like Rosemary's Baby, except it's in Lost. And we also get the flashbacks where Claire had this really weird psychic session, and weird things started to happen, and it was kind of ambiguous and terrifying. And what's even more terrifying was yeah, she met this psychic thing and psychic person, and this psychic somehow predicted that that Claire would somehow end up on that plane, and Claire would somehow crash on the island. And yeah, the ending was also really, really terrifying. When Hurley realized somebody wasn't actually supposed to be on the plane, that person showed up. And then I was like, yep, I knew it. I knew it was him. That person was so suspicious. I knew it was him. And I also really loved the fact that all of those incidents that had happened in Lost, Jack actually knew them pretty well. So if a main character, or at least if a character knows about all of these weird incidents, I think the puzzles can be fit together way more effectively, and more answers can be explained, and all questions can be solved. And then the story went on to episode 11, All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues. Honestly, it's a really great episode. Probably the greatest episode since episode 4, Walkabout. The story is really good. It's confusing, but in a very intriguing and entertaining way. On the previous episode, Claire and Charlie found themselves in a little bit of a pickle. So now Jack, Kate, John, and Boone tried to locate them and find them. And as they continue on to hunt them down and find them, more strange things happened. And again, at the end, there are even more cliffhangers, and I was really, really intrigued. And the flashbacks concerning Jack, once again, are also somewhat interesting and hard-hitting. And once again, it's about Jack's father and their relationship. And once again, more things are being revealed. And then we have episode 12, whatever the case may be, which is basically a pun, but because this episode kind of surrounds a case that Kate owned, or more like Kate was supposed to own, but couldn't, and the flashbacks were about Kate, so it's really interesting. Kate was played by Evangeline Lilly, by the way, so that's an interesting piece of trivia. And a lot has been revealed about Kate's character, and I believe there's a scene between there's a conversation between Kate and Sawyer, and they both admitted to do something terrible, and because they both were actually criminals. So that was sort of like an interesting scene and an interesting character development scene. And then next episode, we have Hearts and Minds, and it's basically an episode about Boone and Shannon. So the question everyone asked last episode had been answered on this episode. Crazy things had happened to Boone. Locke and Boone was hunting, Boone got an open wound, and Locke put some things on it, and some weird things happened to him. I'm not going to tell you. Again, John Locke was kind of this mentor character to Boone, and also to a lot of characters, including Charlie. And what happened to Boone on this episode, it may be a little anticlimactic at the end, but what happened in Boone's mind is pretty crazy. And it was really intense, it was really dramatic and emotional. And at the end, it was surprising. It was surprising. So, underrated episode, indeed. Then it's episode 14, Special. And this episode is about the sad story about Mike and Walt Dawson. So Mike wasn't happy about Walt and Locke being together, and then Locke and Boone still couldn't open the mysterious hatch underground, and not much happened. And at the end, what happened to Walt was actually kind of predictable when it happened. I was like, yep, called it. And then the mystery returns on episode 15, Homecoming. And judging by the title, you kind of know what happened. So yeah, somebody returned to their base and lost his or her memory. And besides of that, we also get to learn a little bit more about Charlie. The most intense and intriguing part is when they take shifts to guard themselves from, the extra character who wasn't supposed to be on the plane. And at last, they made a trap. And the ending, it was actually kind of unpredictable. And I like how how the audience and the characters were so close to finally knowing an answer, and then to not knowing it because it's suddenly ruined and it was taken away from us. And it was a good ending. It was a great episode, and I am highly entertained. And then it's episode 16, Outlaws, and it's another episode about Sawyer. And everybody loves Sawyer, so here we go. So apparently a quote-to-quote boar attacked Sawyer multiple times, and Sawyer was pissed, so he wanted to take revenge, which kind of reminded him of his past. And also, Sawyer and Kate knew each other even more. And it happened on this episode. They played this I Never game, and I know it's gonna end up like I never killed someone, and they're both gonna find out that they both killed someone in their past. And I also like how all these connections are starting to reveal themselves and are popping up everywhere amongst characters and incidents. There is a crazy connection between Sawyer and Jack, and I think it's quite impactful, and it gives both characters a little more information and a little more persona. And one of the cooler episode titles I've ever seen on the show is episode 17's In Translation, which is, again, I really love to predict the story of the episode by looking at its title, because Lost is an interesting TV show, and I thought it's about translation between French and English, but it's actually about Korean and English, because it's another episode about Jin and Sun, and Jin's feud with Michael. Kin and Sun. I don't know why it's written that way. Anyway, Michael built a raft, and somebody burned it down, so Michael blamed it on Kin. But who knew? Who actually burnt the boat? We never know until we reach the twist towards the end of the episode, and it's a plot twist that I didn't see coming. And the ending. Let's talk about the ending. When Hurley put on his earphones, I was like, no, please don't end the episode like this again. And it did. But what sort of surprised me at the end is that the battery of the music players suddenly ran out. What the heck? It's kind of anticlimactic, and I think it's intentional. It's funny, but yet it's so confusing, so I actually dig the ending anyway. Moving on to episode 18, Numbers, which is probably the best episode in Lost since Pilot Part 2. So this episode is about Hurley, and what happened to Hurley is somehow related to what's happening in the plane crash on the island. Hurley, a long time ago, had won a lottery with a set of numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. And then since then, a lot of bad things are happening around him. It's like the numbers are cursed. It's like they're unlucky numbers. And the same set of numbers somehow showed up in one of Danielle's notes for some reason. This is a really interesting episode, and the show made great progress. And then the story continues on episode 19, Deus Ex Machina. This is a John Locke episode about how he found out about his family with a sad ending. Boone and Locke wanted to open a hatch for a very, very, very long time, since episode 11, but every time they tried to open it, they failed. And then Boone suddenly sees visions, which is really creepy and mysterious. Teresa falls up the stairs, Teresa falls down the stairs, and John Locke and Boone really found a plane. Yes, a weird plane in the middle of the island. But in the end, something bad really happened, and it's really, really bad, not gonna lie. And it was sad as well. Yeah, I guess maybe this episode is not as good as the last episode, but still, I love how amazing and great this episode is. And, the ending of the episode is quite tragic, and it's quite memorable as well. And then we have episode 20, Do No Harm. This is one of the saddest episodes I've ever watched on Lost. Even though this episode may not be as mysterious or as chilling or strange or scary and intriguing, it's very sad and emotional and heavy, and I like this episode more than the two previous episodes. So basically a character is dying, and Jack wanted to save the person, but the person called Jack to let him or her go, so Jack did it after a lot of hesitation, and that was really sad. But, while a person was dying, another person was born. And that is Claire giving birth to her baby, whose name is Aaron. It's sort of like somebody died and somebody was born. Something was destroyed and something was created. And I thought this whole concept is pretty nice. And, but still, even though the character had died, I still think that he's gonna somehow show up in visions and hallucinations and shit. But rest in peace anyway. Moving on to episode 21, The Greater Good. Oh boy, we're near the end, finally. And this is a Saeed episode. So everyone distrusted Locke, and Jack and Shannon was pissed off at Locke. Meanwhile, Charlie was taking care of Claire's son, and he found a way to shut him up, which is quite funny. And yeah, there's not much to complain about this episode. Neither is there anything that great about the greater good. Ironically, episode 22 is titled Born to Run, and it is another episode about Kate. Cool. And in the present day, Michael was sick. RIP. And again, more mysterious things happened. People thought that Michael was being poisoned. And John Locke also decided to tell Jack and Sayid something important. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the episode. It's fine, it's decent. Not the best episode on Lost, but yes, it's okay. There's not much to say about this episode, similar to The Greater Good. And another highlight of the episode would be a secret of Kate being revealed. But other than that, it's okay. And then, finally, we hit episode 23 to 25, Exodus, parts 1, 2A, and 2B. Yep, it's actually 3-parted. The best episode since pilot. In fact, the best episode since ever. Now we are finally approaching the end of season 1, and it answers a lot of questions, but also leaves us with even more questions. And yeah, Exodus Part 1 is a very important and critical episode. So Michael wanted to build a raft. He built a raft, and he and some others left the island. Meanwhile, it is heard, I won't tell you who said it, but it is heard that there are actually other people living on the island, and they are coming for the survivors, and they are dangerous, and it just adds a lot of suspense onto the story itself. And now let's get into the spoiler alerts. The spoilers. And I'm giving a spoiler alert. So Michael, Walt, Sawyer, and Jin left. Jin and Sun finally forgave each other. Sawyer was being nice, I guess. And Walt gave Vincent the dog to Shannon because he knew Shannon needs someone to talk to after Boone died. On the other hand, Danielle, the French woman, came and told everyone that the others were coming. She doesn't know who they are. Nobody knows who they are. And she said there are only three options. Run, hide, or die. That's very... I don't like it. And because of that, Jack, Kate, Hurley, Arzt, Locke, and Danielle went to the Black Rock for some dynamite so that they could somehow blow up the hatch and hide people inside. Funny thing, because I thought the Black Rock was literally a black rock, but it's actually a ship. Who knows? And the island became more and more mysterious and strange now. It's very, very entertaining. And there's also this pillar of black smoke that's slowly coming for the survivors. That's very scary as well. And the last episode of season 1 is Exodus Part 2. And it's 1.5 hours long. That's why some people prefer splitting it apart into 2A and 2B. Seriously, this episode is mind-blowing. It's a whole new chapter in Lost. It brings the mystery and the suspense to a whole new level. It's game-changing, it answers more questions and makes us question even more, and it's quality television. The series of events that takes place on this episode is random and unpredictable, and it just mystifies and complicates the whole situation by 10 times. Hell, 100 times. But of course, spoiler alert. Yeah, so basically there are 3 storylines happening on this episode. First, it was Jack, Kate, Boone, and Hurley taking care of dynamites and trying to blow the hatch up. Then there's Sawyer, Michael, Walt, and Jin on the raft. And then there's Claire's baby, Aaron, was taken by Danielle, and Sayid and Charlie were finding the baby. Ours blowing up was actually kind of predictable. He blew up, and I'm like, yep, called it. But what happens next? Oh shit. So after ours blew up, they went back and they had a close encounter with the smoke monster that killed the pilot in the pilot episode. The smoke monster came and everyone was running away except for Locke, who walked closer and then almost fell into a hole because the smoke monster tried to drag him into a hole. Should we believe in our instincts? Should we believe this island yeah, I'm struggling a lot. I don't know if the smoke monster is good or bad, or what is it, or where does it come from, or what dimension is it from, why does it exist? I don't know. And there are also a lot of intriguing flashbacks, especially the Hurley one. It's great. Then Charlie saw the heroine that are probably there for already 40 years. It's really creepy. But then there was a trap set up by Danielle and Charlie stepped on it. And then Saeed had to use gunpowder to burn his wound, to burn Charlie's wound, which is very painful to watch. And later, when they found Danielle, the whole thing made sense and everything was fine again, but it also came to a big conclusion. So now we have two more things to be worried about. In the raft storyline, we finally see civilization outside the island that takes place at present day. It actually feels great to see that for a minute until the strangers took Walt and went away. I was so shocked by what happened. They literally blew up an entire raft, left Michael and Jin on the water, and they kidnapped Walt. Oh my gosh. What will happen to Michael, Jin, and Sawyer? Will they swim back? And what happens to Walt? How should Michael find him back? I have a billion questions after watching this episode. And the last scene is majestic and magical. We take a brief comparison between all the characters who boarded the plane, and the scene itself was very peaceful. The characters greeted each other, not knowing what will happen to them. To Jack and Locke opening the hatch as the camera comes down in a long, dark tunnel in the hatch. And the hatch is the new chapter, and certainly a great, great, great cliffhanger, and I truly, really, really enjoyed this episode to a great extent. Overall, I actually really, really enjoy the first season of Lost. Every single episode feels like it somehow... Overall, I really, really, really enjoy the first season of Lost. Every episode feels important to the main premise and the main plot of the entire show. And I also really appreciate and enjoy how this show makes the audience question a lot. And it's also packed with chilling, disturbing, ominous, and ambiguous things and scenes that makes you have such an undescribable feeling to the island. The directing is brilliant, the performances are decent, the soundtrack is great. I believe the person, the composer of the soundtrack for Lost actually won an Oscar. And yeah, I look forward to season 2 a lot after watching this season. In fact, I watched the first half of season 2 episode 1 right after Exodus Part 2 because it's such a great cliffhanger. I couldn't hold myself back from watching it. So yeah, I will also be, while watching the series, the season, every time something weird happens, every time there's a question, I would type them down on my phone and I would put them in the comment section below. So yeah, the worst episode is I guess whatever the case may be, because it's a little uneventful and probably the most bland episode of the season. But the best episode is either Pilot Part 2 or Exodus Part 2. Pilot is really special and interesting, probably the best pilot episode ever. But truly, Exodus Part 2 really is undoubtedly the most dramatic and mysterious of all the episodes on Season 1. I'm saying Lost Season 1 is mind-blowing, and I'm giving it a 9 to a 10 out of 10. What? A 10? Yeah, a 10. So, have you watched Lost Season 1 from 1 to 10? How much did you rate it? Like if you like it, hate if you hate it. Why would you hate it? Because it's great. And subscribe if you want more. J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof killing it.